Welcome to Tuesdays to Your Health. We're delighted to have you here today. We'll be spending the hour focused on athletic performance and functional fitness as we age. I'm fortunate to have Dr. Harris Masket joining us today, and we're going to be in conversation, as well as Jae Yee from JBodyworks, about how do we maintain our optimal vitality and energy levels as we age. Whether you're 40, 50, 60, or up towards your 70s and 80s, we're really focused on biohacking your personalized approach so that you can maximize your vitality and quality of life. All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for your patience while we got ourselves organized here. It's great to have everyone in person. It's great to have everyone on Zoom. Today, we have the pleasure of having both Dr. Harris Masket and Jae Yee here today. My name is Dr. Brad Jacobs with BlueWave Medicine. We're here at gorgeous Cavallo Point Lodge in the Healing Arts Center and Spa. And we have both folks here in person and live, so thank you all for attending. It's great to have everyone. We're going to focus today on thinking about how to biohack our health span. And so both those words have a lot of sort of information in them, so I brought in Dr. Harris Masket to help unpack some of that, and Jae Yee toward the end will help us sort of see it in live and how we sort of walk through it in our everyday life, and how we can really check ourselves and go to practitioners to help check us as well and try and optimize our own health and health span. So let me start by orienting a little bit where we're at. So we're here in Northern California in Fort Baker, Cavallo Point. It's about 80,000 acres here in the GGNRA, Golden Gate National Recreation Area. And Cavallo Point's got about 80 acres here of a hotel and the Healing Arts Center and Spa. We're fortunate to have our practice here called BlueWave Medicine. And this is a 4-part series. We're doing the first part here around healthy aging, focused on movement and vitality. And I'll let Harris speak to himself about his orientation, but I'm going to ask him a bit how he comes into this conversation. So without further ado, we'll get started. So Harris, great to have you. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Brad.
Yeah, it's great to have you here.
It's great to be with you.
Harris joined BlueWave Medicine about 2 months ago now as a new concierge medicine physician, so it's great to have you on board with us.
Yeah.
And one of the great things about Harris, in my experience with him, has been his expertise and interest in sports medicine and athletic performance. So going everywhere from professional athletes, or college and professional athletes, all the way to sort of folks like us that are a range of our different ages, 30s, 40s, 70s even, that want to stay active and healthy. So it's great to have Harris aboard. So maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, if you don't mind, to orient us sort of what your interests are and how you came into this conversation today.
Sure. So I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for coming and joining us. So I have spent my life trying to figure out how to biohack my own health span and how to figure out how to stay athletic and vibrant as I keep getting older and older. And I had the fortune of working at UC Berkeley with some terrific athletes for so many years. I have the fortune of being the doctor for the Oakland Spiders of the American Ultimate Disc League. I'm sure there's a lot of fans out there. And I'm also an athlete myself, trying to still play Ultimate Frisbee at this late stage of my life. So I understand this struggle, and one of the reasons that I'm here now and joining you is that I'm excited to be working with people across the health span in terms of ages and different experiences, and it's exciting to be working with people who are coming at this from just a lot of different backgrounds.
That's great. I appreciate that orientation. And so for today, and you spoke into sort of biohacking and a health span, and for a lot of people, they may not know really I know what my lifespan is, but what's my health span? Maybe you can speak a little bit into that today.
Sure.
What do I mean by health span?
Yeah, so we know what lifespan is. Lifespan, we think we know it. Let's just name our terms. Like lifespan is like how long you live, like the number of years, let's say. But health span is how long you're living healthy. Or, as I was telling my kids last night when they were saying, what is health span, Dad? It's how many years that you are living feeling good, feeling strong, and not having the downsides of what could be unhealthy aging. And so living as many years as you can, feeling as good as you can. And no one knows, of course, how long they're gonna be here, but if we can do it feeling vibrant and strong and balanced and resilient, as long as we can, that's what we're going for. And there are interesting and fun ways to try to figure out the game plan behind us, figure out what's our DNA, what's the secret code behind the machine that we can maybe figure out to do this and get clever with it and have fun with it.
So I know there's sort of, I think you had a slide maybe, I don't know if you want to show it now or later, talking about Healthspan and fitness.
Perfect segue. Let's do slide 1 if we can. What you're seeing on here, the x-axis or the bottom of your screen should be a time. That's basically how long we're here for. And on the y-axis going up and down is sort of this measure of vitality, fitness. And at the lower part of it, it's where we're starting to get into some kind of dysfunction, right? So we all know that the curve that you see, sort of the first curve on the left-hand side is sort of, it's standard, but what if we were to move that curve a little to the right, and then even move it more to the right, so that when it finally hits that x-axis, when people sort of, I guess, they're dying in that moment, if you can compress those, but not compress the other one, so basically you're living longer, feeling fit, longer feeling functional, and avoiding the downsides, that's what we call Healthspan. So that's I think the definition that you and I kind of talk about.
Yeah, okay. So my understanding of that is, like you were saying, so you don't have this like long slope where you're like slow demise. Like I say to people, look, if you're going to be miserable, you live to 100, but you're going to be miserable the last half of your life, that doesn't sound like fun. So for some people, when I tell them you have to eat lots of vegetables, they get really depressed. Yeah. I'm like, well, if that affects your quality of life that much, maybe we should reorient it. But ideally, you have a high quality life, and then basically you die in the middle of the night when you're 92. Right? That's
192. Who knows how long it is, but we don't want to spend those last 100 years or 50 years, whatever it is, laying in a bed not able to do anything. We want to be playing ultimate frisbee and surfing for the last 50 years if we can.
Okay, that makes sense to me. I get that. So, and if I heard you right, and that graph showed like you move from I'm super frail or I'm able to function, and then I'm super fit, like I'm super active and I've got a lot of fitness to me. And our goal here is to, if you're optimizing your vitality, is to stay as fit as possible. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, okay. Stay as fit as possible and also feeling good. And that's something that we're going to talk about too.
Yeah. Okay, so there's this Healthspan, lifespan thing. Can we talk a little bit about I guess my understanding of a Healthspan is you say like, okay, I want to add more quality to my life, right? So I want to add more life to my years, if I will. Not just years to my life, but life to my years.
Yeah, life to your years, sure.
Yeah. And then there's this concept that we talked a little bit about beforehand, like chronological age versus biological age. And do you want to speak to that, or I'm happy to speak to it? Like, what are your thoughts?
I'll tee you up for this because I think this is, really your wheelhouse. But there's this idea that you are chronologically. I am 52 years old, and that's how long I've been here in terms of like calendar dates. But biologically, you might say, because of how good I look, that I'm 30 years old or something like that. But there are these tests that you can run that say, oh, you are biologically this. And that's as far as I've gone with it. Do you want to dive into that some more?
Yeah, I mean, so chronological age, like, okay, I was born 1964, and I'm 59 years old. Biological age is really this malleable thing. So you can either smoke your whole life, eat no vegetables, be 50, but biologically you're actually 70, or the opposite, and you're actually like 30. So some of you may remember real age, if you're old enough to remember real age. That was before Mehmet Oz decided he was going to become a politician, let alone a celebrity on television. And he was just plain old trying to do good surgery and moved into a little bit of integrated medicine. And then with Roizen, the two of them came together and created this thing called real age. Anyone remember that? So you put in a whole bunch of things. Do you smoke? How much do you exercise? How many vegetables do you eat? Do you have a family history of cancers? Blah, blah, blah. And based on that, they would calculate your age as best they could. There's some other companies out there now that are doing this immunotyping, where they sort of look at, based on lab values, that is, really sort of refined look at some of the metabolomics, we call them. So where they can get a sort of a signature of your current age, based on sort of immune typing. And so, again, biological age looked at that. Some people, we were talking about telomeres earlier when Harris and I were chatting, and that's another way to measure the ends of your chromosomes, have like these, like imagine shoelaces with like these little plastic caps on the end. And over time, those caps get more and more worn, they get shorter and shorter. And as they get shorter and shorter, that's basically cellular aging. And so as your telomeres age, that's another way to sort of examine your biological age. And apparently it's malleable and modifiable. So if you're super stressed, under stressful conditions, you might age more. And then if you can sort of build more resilience, sleep more, eat better, take care of yourself, you can actually reverse your own aging. Like, you can literally see the shifts. The science is, it's a little fudgy. There's a lot of interesting companies out there trying to do interesting work. Telomeres have been around for a while. It's sort of a longer conversation, maybe for another webinar. But I think it's exciting, and the beautiful thing about it is you can change it. So you're like, one day you're reading yourself out at this age, and you do a whole bunch of lifestyle changes in your life, and then all of a sudden you're younger, which is great. All right, so let's talk, if we can shift gears a little bit. What is it, this whole idea about biohacking? Does anyone on the audience know about hacking? Biohacking? Anyone ever try and do their own biohacking? A few people raising their hands. So I'm going to put this on Dr. Harris here. What's your view on biohacking? What does it mean to biohack? Give us a little detail.
Sure. So a few examples that might just seem really easy to understand. Biohacking. If you drive by a high school campus and you see the team out there practicing, that's biohacking. They figured out something they can do to get better at the sport they're playing, and it turns out it works. Practicing makes you better. There's a terrific old story about Charles Atlas, an American strongman from like around 1900 that I just came across recently. So Charles Atlas the story goes like this, and so correct me if you've heard an even better detailed version, but Charles Atlas was a weakling, he felt, and there was this vision he saw in a magazine of a strong person, and that strong person had muscles all over on top of their muscles. And Charles Atlas is wandering through, trying to figure out how to get there, and he's wandering through the zoo, and he sees this lion stretching and contracting its muscles, and he has this aha moment. So he goes into his basement, and he spends the next 3 months contracting his muscles, not realizing that he's doing a thing called isometrics. And 3 months later, he comes out, and somebody sees him and says, "What happened to you?" And he figured himself out. So he biohacked. It's an early biohack, and there's so many examples of it. People just figuring out something about their physiology that works. And I've done it, and you've done it. We've all done these little things that have been successful in our lives. And that's what we are really trying to do. We're pouring through the literature to figure out what are more ways to biohack. What do we have to wear on our fingers to help us biohack? So that's what biohacking is trying to figure out, like I said before, what's the secret sauce behind us? And if we can figure out some pathway, maybe we can live a healthier life and expand our health span.
Okay. Yeah. So if I hear you right, what you're saying is like we all have our sort of own energetic signature. We're each individuals, and we each sort of have our own way that we walk through the world. We each respond differently to different circumstances, and our biology, our physiology, if we can hack into it through wearables or through mindfulness meditation, becoming aware of ourselves, how we feel, how we act, that's a way to sort of use our own body and mind, body, spirit as a laboratory, yeah? Perfect. And then, okay, and explore sort of how we can use our body as a laboratory to run N of 1 experiments, like N of 1 meaning sample size of 1, meaning me. I go to the gym, I lift weights, I feel more confident, I feel stronger. Some people go and lift weights and maybe they feel exhausted, they don't feel as good, whatever, everyone's different.
Right.
Okay, that works for me. So here's a question. When we think about sort of your health span, and you're talking about trying to increase your health span, what's the motivation? Like, why should we do it? Why should people care?
What's the evidence, maybe, like that this actually works, that you can be effective?
Yeah, I mean, from a let's start with a subjective perspective. Like, does it make me, like, I think like I'll have more energy, or like what sorts of things can we think about as I try and increase?
Yeah, well, right, because we're not just going to increase our number of years, and we're not just trying to eat more broccoli because somebody told us to, but I don't really like eating broccoli. We're trying to actually feel good. And there's this amazing thing that people are reporting who are doing some of this biohacking, that they feel good. And some of the things people say is, I feel strong. And some people say, I slept great. And some people say, I had more resiliency at work. and at home, and I was getting along with people better, or I got a promotion, or I felt more sexual vitality, or people look at me when I walk down the street, like some real tangible benefits that people are saying when they're following some of these, the things that we're helping them with, or that they're just figuring out on their own. People are saying, no, there's tangible benefits. They're feeling something. Not just that they're living to be 78 and still play pickleball. They're actually noticing day by day improvements that feel good. I think that's sort of the kicker for me. And that's when I'm working out and I'm feeling like I'm about to go to a national championship for ultimate frisbee. And as I get closer and closer to that event, I'm really getting in better shape and I'm feeling good. Like I walk down the street feeling like I'm athletic. I mean, I'm not playing football, but I feel good and strong and balanced. And that's a great feeling for me.
Okay. So I'm curious in the group, that those that are here in attendance with us today, some of you guys do some biohacking. I know there's a few in the audience that do. What do you guys do to sort of hack your biology? And that's part one. Does anyone want to volunteer? Aura. Okay, Aura Ring. Yeah, Aura Ring? CGM. Continuous glucose monitoring devices, okay. I think Harris might be a specimen for both of those things right now. Is that correct?
I just took off the CGM last week, but I had it on, so I'm with you. It's terrific. It just expired. But I just got this Aura Ring, and it's really interesting. The data that you're getting, like I was just telling Brad, I'm actually sleeping well. I'm so happy that I've just, you toss and turn a couple of times, and now I'm finding, I'm actually doing a good job with sleep. So by prioritizing sleep, you find out that you're actually sleeping well. So I'm with you on that. That's a great one.
Anything else?
LDN.
Couldn't hear you.
LDN.
Okay, so which means?
Low dose and a word I can't.
Naltrexone? Yeah. Okay, so using low dose naltrexone. So that's a controversial topic, using low dose naltrexone. What have you found? Why do you use it?
Makes me feel less creaky, like right away almost.
Great. So you're feeling younger, less creaky in the body.
Your body feels good. That's terrific. Well, I mean, that's what we're going for, is feeling good.
That's great. Anything else anyone do or notice? Yes?
Intermittent fasting.
Okay, so intermittent fasting, which I like to call timed eating. Is that what you mean by timed eating? Or do you mean like every once in a while doing a 2-day, 3-day fast?
No, I mean the timed eating.
Timed eating, yeah. So people will sort of narrow their time windows to 8 hours, maybe 10 hours. I think Karolinska Institute showed 10 hours is okay as well, if my memory is correct. And you can get big changes in physiologic markers. There is some question, there is some science that came out showing that some people get extremity wasting of their muscles. And maybe you want to speak into that? I know we've talked about it before.
Sure. What time nutrition is basically trying to keep the amount of calories that you need to eat, keep the amount of nutrients that you need getting into your body, but decreasing the time during the day that you're actually eating. The concept being that you're giving your body either more rest time, more recovery time, less time with insulin coursing through your blood vessels. And the concern might be, though, that when you're eating less, you have to be quite on top of those hours that you're eating. You have to make sure that you're getting enough protein, your macronutrients, your protein, your carbs, your fats. You have to be sure that you're getting a diversity of your food in. And so if we're all stressed and trying to make everything happen, sometimes it's hard to get all of those things in. And in one study I think we were talking about, people were getting less of the protein in that they needed. And so if you don't get as much protein as you need, some of your muscles don't get to build up like we need them to.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I think we'll learn a lot more about it over time. There's a lot more studies looking at it. Yes?
What do you guys think about fasting mimicking diets?
Yeah.
Like Bulger Longo?
Right. So, yeah. So the fasting mimicking diet is a great question. And that diet is basically doing low-calorie diet, so 500 calories in this case. The Prolon is an example of it. We have no financial investment in them. It's 500 calories a day. That comes in a package you do it for like 5 days, And then there's been great studies looking at it showing great cardiovascular changes in the physiology, cardiometabolic changes. Really interesting work, I think. And doing it, then they recommend like once a quarter. Some people do it once a month. I have one patient in particular who's really a poster child for that. Lost 40 pounds. Hemoglobin A1, his average glucose measurements measured by hemoglobin A1C. He went to being from diabetic to actually below being even pre-diabetic. So I'm like a hemoglobin A1C of about 6.5 down to really 5.5. There's dramatic shifts. Actually gained more muscle mass. Blood pressure dropped, reflux went away, joint swelling, you were talking about creakiness went away, all through FMD. And also fasting. He will do like 72-hour fasts as well, and would measure ketones and glucose and looking at that ratio as well. So I think it's really interesting work. And I think all of our physiology is different. I don't know what you think, but some people respond really well to it, some people don't. And some people have a really hard time. So I think everyone's a little different.
Yeah, I mean, I think that part of biohacking is figuring out what works for you, and part of having a team working with you is helping figure out, well, what works for your system, and that's why we like to test your system with all the different ways we can test your markers, figure out what should we be following. So what blood tests should we be following? What physical markers in terms of strength, balance, and things should we be following so that we know, is this working, or should we pivot and go in a different direction?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll talk more about it later if time permitted, but we do a lot of physiologic markers, body composition testing, full battery of labs. We'll put people in a performance lab here that we have as well to look at a lot of these factors. And like, we want to know how people feel, and we also want to look at some objective measures as well.
So what we're looking at here is just sort of, these are the signs of aging that's not going well. And like we're saying, maybe we all get there, whether we're 192 or 92, whatever it is, in those last days. We're trying to decrease the amount of time we're spending at what's called frailty. So frailty is weakness, difficulty with longer walks, difficulty with being able to stand up, fatigue, being able to remember things as well, and even losing weight and losing muscle mass. So those are some of the classic signs of frailty. If you go to the next slide, what we're trying to talk about is actually being an athletic person all the way into whatever years you can be. And there's some terrific pictures here, which thank you, Google. But what we're all trying to do is, we're not just talking about avoiding frailty. This isn't a talk of let's just push frailty back. This is actually a talk of let's realize that we're all athletic. Let's realize that we're natural athletes, that even though we're not the starting quarterback for the football team, we're still athletes. And some of the things I wanted to talk about tonight are how we're athletes and what is it about us that makes us as humans athletic.
Great, thanks for that slide. Great. Well, I hope my bod looks like that when I'm in my 70s as well.
Which one?
Take the guy in the upper right-hand corner.
All right.
All right, let's speak into that a little bit. So what can we do to increase our health span? Maybe speaking to that, I know we're going to talk a bit about sort of the physicality and what I call active living. Mm-hmm. So the pillar 1 of the 6 pillars. Maybe I'll just, tee it up for
talk
you.
about, Tina, is that from, all right,
Yeah.
I got you. So what can we do?
Yeah.
Yeah, so staying active. And we'll talk about why. Why does staying active work? But let's just start with one of the rules that we've learned by scouring the literature. And what it turns out is if people are active, if people move, if people keep moving, they live healthier and longer. There's a terrific study. It came out a few years ago, just about 3-4 years ago, that they just looked at over many years, so enough to really see how it affected health span and longevity. Over many years, if you look at people's fitness, so you put them on a treadmill and you get them walking or moving as much as they can, the people who were the fittest in terms of cardiovascular fitness did the best, and all the way down, the less fit, they did less well. The less fit, they did less well. Finally, down to the bottom group, they did less well. You can pull up slide, I guess that was the slide you had before. It's a colorful curve. And what you're going to see there on this slide is, there's a lot there, so let's just go through it real quickly. But I want you to notice that there's this lovely white curve that's showing the effect of activity. So what you're seeing on this slide is they took people and they tested them. Physical activity in terms of cardiovascular fitness. The people who were the least fit had a real significant impact on their health span. People who were the most fit had a significant impact in a positive way. They lived the longest. And what they then extrapolated was if you took that group of people who were the least fit and you gave them exercise and you moved them up just a little bit from the lowest, the sedentary people, up to just low level of fitness, the effect on their health span was tremendous. They lived 20% longer just in the span that they were studying here. So what does that show you? That if this group of people did something really simple like 3 hours, now 3 hours of walking a week may not be easy in everyone's situation, but if you just did 3 hours of brisk walking a week, that group of people who were sedentary improved their health span by 20%, which is better than any drug, better than anything we can imagine. So that's one of the things that we're talking about here, is that you can have a tremendous impact just with movement. And I'm glad that's one of the pillars of the 6 pillars that you created.
Yeah, so if I remember that data you were sharing with me, like going from basically being on the couch all the time to moving my body 180 minutes a week of walking, there's like 20% reduction in mortality, and then roughly 18% or something. And then beyond that, you only get another, whatever it is, 3 to 8% additional benefit with a lot more effort, which is sort of what that slide is showing with that curve. So you do get benefit, it's just reduced marginal benefit, but continued benefit from a mortality perspective, survival perspective. Like many of us feel a lot better when we vigorously exercise. I don't know, how do you guys feel? Like, who works out 150 minutes or more a week exercise? And do you feel different? So most of the crowd's raising their hand. We have a fit Northern California crew here. But what about, like, do you feel different from walking 3 hours a week versus, vigorous activity? Do you notice a difference, or how do you guys feel? So people are saying yes, they notice a big difference.
A lot of thumbs up.
Yeah, so I think there's a subjective feeling of vitality and embodiment and whatever we all may feel that may not show up on the mortality benefit. There's a marginal, but you feel better, which honestly, most people don't do what we do to prevent death. Most of us do what we do to feel better. So if it happens to prevent death along the way, even better, right? So that's helpful. So you were asking about the 6 pillars. So about a decade ago, we developed a short story on this is that I was fortunate to be invited to edit a book for the American College of Physicians that was supposed to review the entire literature on anything that's not been studied in medical school. So what they call alternative medicine for every health condition. So we brought in about 70 people to help. It was about 15 or 16 chapters. So maybe half a dozen people per chapter to review all the literature by, heart disease, cancer, men's health, women's health, et cetera. And everyone reviewed the literature. And at the end of all that, this acupuncture treatment for this particular condition, what's the benefit? Or this chiropractic manipulation for this particular back issue. At the end of all that, I realized that self-care was actually by and far and away the most potent and safest and cheapest therapy available. So that led me to develop the 6 Pillars of Healthy Living, which was really these activities that work across all health issues, not just like this particular maneuver for this particular condition, and those are, active living, healthy eating, restorative sleep, resiliency and mental focus, connections and relationships, and having purpose and meaning in our life. And so we have an assessment we do with our clients where we sort of assess those 6 domains of health, and through all the great work and behavioral work that's been done by BJ Fogg and many others out there, we realize that it doesn't really matter if you need to work on something, that what really matters is that you want to work on something. So we sort of get that assessment and then say to them, okay, great, so these 2 or 3 areas are the ones that you're least sort of active and beneficial in. Which of those you actually care about and want to do something about? Someone that's never exercised, that doesn't want to exercise, to get them to now exercise just because they scored the worst is not going to work. They'll last for a month and then fail. So my sense of things is that each one of these domains has relevance to our health span, but today we're going to focus on our physicality and all that relates to that. So back to you on that. So I'm sort of curious about your view on sort of mobility and movement every day, and where that comes from, maybe teleologically or through our ancestors, and sort of Help me understand that sort of origin. If you
Sure, yeah. And one of the things about the last study we talked about was this was just physical fitness in terms of cardiorespiratory, meaning people who could do a treadmill for X number of minutes. And that wasn't even looking at strength training or what we all call HIIT training or high intensity interval training. If you add that, you even get more benefit. So there's actually a diversity of movements that help us. And what I've loved diving into, what I love geeking out about, is our physiology and how we evolved this way. So there's a terrific book by anthropologist named Lieberman out of Harvard called Exercised. And this is the doctor who's talked a lot about how we used to be persistence hunters, and that's become controversial. But what I don't think is controversial in some of the research is looking at how we evolved. We are primates, and no one seems to question that. But we are the only bipedal primates who can go incredible distances on our 2 feet. They just don't do that, except for this one. We also use our hands incredibly diverse, with incredible diversity and dexterity, which is also uncommon. We're incredibly well adapted to go long distances in heat, in cold, running, even going high speeds. We can compete, not well, but we can compete with some other animals that have 4 legs. So it's impressive what we've done, and I think one of the best ways I see this is I was just at my son's track meet the other day, and it reminded me of running high school track and how much I loved it, but also the incredible diversity that you see at a track meet. You've got people throwing things, you've got people jumping over things, using a stick to catapult themselves over things. People are running short distances, people are running incredibly long distances. So what humans can do is incredible. And what I think if you extrapolate from that, you say, well, then should humans be doing all of this? Like, what happens if we do all of this? And so you take these studies where you say, all right, let's say you have a group of people who just run long distance. How well do they do? Well, now you compare them to a group of people who just do high intensity interval training or sprinting. And you compare them to the group of people who just, lift or throw a shot put. And it turns out the group who does all of them, it does a lot better. They feel stronger. They feel more balanced. They feel good in their bodies longer, and they have more health span. So that's, I think, the exciting thing, and the great thing about it is that gives us so much we can do. That gives us so many options for finding a fun way to move our body. So there's this terrific study that they did where they said, all right, let's see how people do in terms of balance. So if you just say, stand on one leg for 10 seconds, and you took a group of people who were 51 to 75, like you see on the slide, and you say, all right, can you stand on your one leg for, now assuming that you don't have, they assumed these people don't have an incredible injury on that one leg, or they're healthy enough to stand on each leg and walk. If they did, and if they could do that, they had an incredible advantage over those who couldn't in terms of health span. And actually in this one it was just actually mortality. It wasn't really health span, it was just longevity. But it's an incredible study if you look at this. And so, I don't know, did you want to try to do it here?
Yeah, so how about we do it? Let's get everyone standing up, and if you that are watching live, let's get you to stand up as well. And want to lead us through?
Sure. Do I have to stand or can I keep sitting?
You can keep sitting.
All right, good. All right, everyone. Feel your feet. Feel your feet. You can bend your knees a little bit for just a second so that you're not just like jumping up into this. You can even wiggle a little bit. All right, and then I want you to choose, what's your good foot? If you were going to kick a soccer ball and it was coming at you, what's that foot? All right, we're going to do the other foot. We're going to do the other foot. It's all right. That was the foot you were planting with to kick the ball, so you'll be happy. All right, so stand up on that foot that you're planting with, and we'll go on the count of 3. You ready? 1, 2, 3, go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. How'd we do? All right. So interesting that was so telling. You can all sit again. We don't have to, you've all passed. You've all lived through the rest of this talk. So interesting how telling this is. And so this is an example, scouring the evidence to find out that there's some interesting markers. And what is this about? This is about, like we keep talking, balance. We talked about protein and muscle strength. We're talking about your mind and staying sharp. We're talking about resilience. We're talking about so many aspects that are involved here, and all of it is leading to health span.
That's great. It's really helpful. Yeah, I sometimes have them, so actually you can do this at home. I was going to say don't do this at home, but you can. Is do the same thing and actually close your eyes. That's the advanced level training. Just make sure you don't fall and hit something. But that's a great, it's a great way to sort of see where people are. That study was 51 to 70, I think, if my memory is correct.
75, yeah.
75. Great. What are some other ways we can measure that look at other tests that people do?
Yeah, a simple one is grip strength, and we got a slide. You can just pop that up. This grip strength is basically, and this came out of a wonderful study that they did out of the UK Biobank. A lot of people, they just compared over many, many years, and they did grip strength to mortality. But I think they did it more than just to mortality. They did this, and what you're seeing on your screen is a standard dynamometer, which we have here, or we'll be getting here if we don't have it already, to just measure what somebody's grip strength. You can pull the slide down. There's another measure that's also the bar hang, where you hang from a pull-up bar and you just hang as long as you can. Both of those studies have been shown to not just indicate length of life, but actually freedom from illness, freedom and recovery from illness. So people who had a heart attack, if they had a higher grip strength, they recovered faster. If people had pneumonia, higher grip strength, recovered faster. If people had a significant fall or injury, grip strength, bar hang, all correlated to recovery. So this is all about muscle strength, eating well, and then this sort of dovetails into what we're going to talk about with inflammation, diet, the things that are going in your body actually working for you. And we like to follow those measurements as well to figure out if there's, if your system's working well.
Great. Now, I know there was some runner study we were talking about. Maybe
Oh, yeah.
Speaking of that.
Yeah, the terrific study called the Stanford Runners Study. And what they did was they took, we don't have a slide on this one, but they basically took a group of people who were one large cohort who were basically about the same in terms of healthiness, and they were in their mid-50s, and they studied them for 21 years. And half of them were runners, and half of them were running from that moment on, and half not running. Now, there's problems with the study. It's an old study. We've learned a lot about studies since then. But the interesting thing about the Stanford Runners study was a lot of people thought at the time when they launched this study that, well, runners, their knees are going to go and their backs are going to go, and they're not going to live any longer because, there were some famous deaths from running at the time. And it turns out that the group who were runners had an incredible survival advantage, but they also had an incredible advantage in terms of injury. In terms of morbidity, in terms of knees and ankles and hips and backs. So it turns out that the exercise they were doing was preventive from all of those maladies. And you would have, the common thinking at the time was, oh, wait a second, this is going to cause them to have difficulty with their bodies. Right. So it turns out, and we've learned this in the sports medicine literature just in the last handful of years, that the arthritis we think is related to running, like the osteoarthritis of the knees, actually is an inflammatory condition. It's caused by a bad diet. It's caused by unfortunate causes of inflammation in your body. So it's actually inflammation in your joints that's causing some of this problem. Now, yes, if you pound on these joints that are already inflamed and sore, that could make them worse. But by far and away, the arthritis that we're seeing that we thought was all related to being too active is more often related to having too much inflammation.
Yeah. So that's a whole nother talk, really, focused on inflammation and systemic reasons for inflammation, environmental exposures, looking at your gut integrity, lots of areas that we're both interested in. But for the sake of time, that's really helpful and interesting to me. And I'm curious about, what do you do? Like, have you optimized your health span? What do you do in your day-to-day life?
Well, I don't want to jinx myself, because who knows? But what I do is I'm a timed eater. I read all about it about 6 years ago, and I thought, well, this sounds interesting. Maybe this will decrease the amount of insulin coursing through my blood. So I'll try timed eating, and I tried it, and the next day it was done. I never had trouble with it again. It was easy. It seems like my body didn't want to eat all morning, and so it seemed like maybe I was forcing it. So I do that. I try to diversify what I'm doing in terms of working out. So I have a base like this triangle I like to imagine. So at the base is like your zone 2 cardio, and then the next level is your weights and your restorative work to make sure that you're feeling strong and balanced, and that you're supporting your back so that you can do some heavy lifting later. And then I add more strength training later on when I'm feeling strong, and then I add some sprinting and some hill running and some high intensity interval training in the smaller amounts. I eat well. I eat as well as I can. I try to have colorful foods. I try to have things that aren't in plastic wrappers. You know, I also try to pay attention to what's working and what's not. So if I notice something's off, you know, I notice my belly's not feeling that great, I sort of play around with my food for the week and see if I can just eliminate one thing and see if that changes something. I look at my skin. I feel what feels good, what doesn't. And I try to pay attention to those things. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, my understanding, looking at the literature around food, at least when it comes, is vegetables. So, like when people ask about a silver bullet, what's your silver bullet? In my mind, it's how many servings of vegetables you eat. And it turns out that whether you go from 0 servings to 1, or you go from 5 servings to 6, every incremental additional serving of vegetable that you eat in stepwise fashion, up to 7 servings a day, will reduce your chances of dying by 6 to 8%. Every serving. So if you go from 0 to 1, 3 to 4, such that those that eat 7 servings of vegetables a day or more actually are at a 42% less reduced risk of mortality. So I like the vegetable one. No matter where you are, you don't have to feel guilty. If you go for only eat 1 serving a day, just go to 2. You're making progress. So, and then there's all the other pieces you spoke to. So I really like that base, that foundational piece. I think we talked about the book that's called Training for the Uphill Athlete, for those that are really into this. It goes into heavy detail. Some world-ranked ultra-endurance trainers that really go into big detail on this, and how 80%'s around, well, we're maybe speaking to this, around endurance-based training, and then doing the high-intensity interval training, the HIIT training, maybe more like 10-50% of the time. So maybe we can speak into that as well. We have a little bit of time left before I'm going to ring Jay up, but can you talk about what types of exercise are best and how you think about that?
Sure, and and we'll have a slide in a minute to sort of illustrate this, but if you go back to thinking of how we evolved, we do endurance really well. Maybe we were persistence hunters, maybe we weren't, but we definitely would walk all day long, chasing things, grabbing things, climbing things, and every once in a while we'd have to run really fast, and every once in a while we have to lift something really heavy. So just think about that when you're imagining what would be a good exercise regimen. So you want the basic amount of what you're doing to be movement. So the lower end of cardio. So zone 2 is, the zones are hard to imagine. What I like to think of it is, and if you really want to dive into the zones, I'll talk zones with you all day, but basically it's your heart rate being at about 60% of your max. And what's your max? It's 220 minus your age. So 60% of that, for me, it's in the low hundreds range. You can do this activity and have a little bit of a conversation. And you really want to up that intensity, but for a small portion of your week too, maybe once or twice. And you want to do some weight training. And that can be anything, but what we're going to talk, why we're bringing Jay on, is because we want to do that well. We want to do that safely. You want to feel balanced and strong. So, it's not about getting into the gym and lifting the heaviest thing and then being injured for 2 weeks. It's about feeling strong so that you can bend down and lift something, so that you can bend down and lift your grandchild up, or bend down and lift groceries and then carry them up 2 flights of stairs, so that you can be functionally strong. And we have a slide you can put up now that shows some of the exciting technology that we're going to be bringing, or that we're bringing to, checking your fitness. So you see in the bottom right, there's this exercise testing, and what you see in this really cool graph is zone 1 through 5 training, and then you see these little red dots, which are your lactate level at each of those, and you see these lines called LT1 and LT2, and what we're trying to figure out here is, where are you at in your zone where you can go forever almost? You could just jog or walk or walk uphill at that rate for a long, long time. And where are you kind of pushing it? So now you're going up in your triangle to something that's a little harder to maintain. And where are you at your, like you said, 10 to 15% at most of your week is in your final level, where you're really just pushing yourself and you kind of get so breathless so fast. Those are really exciting workouts. They're great. Everyone loves those. Those make good advertisements on people's websites. But they're not things that you can do all that much because they're hard on the body. And that's why we need to see people to help us with our bodies and help us do this, well. And that's one of the reasons why, who we work with great providers who are really good at teaching us how to bend down, how to squat, how to do a Romanian deadlift correctly if that's what you want to do, how to activate your core and breathe while you're doing it all. And that's, and that's a huge piece of what we're trying to help people do is move well.
Yeah, so I think it'd be helpful for all of us to understand the zones a little bit better.
Sure.
So I know you know a lot. You're being generous and kind by not going into all the detail, but some detail would be nice.
I can do this.
So let's talk about sort of lactate levels a little bit for those that like this. I think there's some people in the room and people online. Lactate level 1, 2. Help us understand those thresholds and what those mean.
Sure. So your lactate. Lactate is a byproduct of exercise. You start to exercise because what you're using is a little bit of carb and a little bit of fat. But mostly, when you start in that low zone exercise you can do for a long time, you're burning fat. And the body loves burning fat because it is so energetic. There's so much energy you can get out of burning fat, and the body's really efficient at burning fat, just grabbing fat, and that's wonderful. But it's slow. So when you need to up the intensity, you start burning a little bit of sugar. And now you're in this mixture of burning fat and burning sugar. And when you really need to up the intensity, fat goes on the back burner, literally, and you now start burning sugar. And that's sort of the ramp up that you saw on that slide. The more quick burning of sugar you're doing, the more lactate you're producing. Now you are able to use the lactate, but you're not able to use it fast enough. So as you increase your intensity, you're building up more lactate, using it less, and finally you get to this lactate 2 threshold. So lactate 1 is where you actually start moving a little faster than you can just recycle your energy, and you actually move into burning your carbs. Lactate level 2 is we're all sugar and we're not at an equilibrium anymore. Now we're just burning and our muscles are starting to ache as they're accumulating lactate, and we're not going to go very far here. So lactate 1 level is a really good measure to know because before lactate 1, you could do this for a long time. And I like to think of that as being like our zone 2 workout. And you need a base there. Lactate level 2 is above that. This is something you're doing for a very short period of time. It's a sprint, maybe halfway around a track if you're in really good shape. And then you're going to sit down for a little while.
So that's typically what, zone 5 we're hitting?
Yep,
Zone 4,
now you're in zone 5.
Okay, and my recollection, going way back, biochemistry is you generate like 2 ATP or so instead of 36 ATP. Like there's a huge reduction in your ability to generate energy.
Yes, an incredible, exactly.
Okay.
ATP is the spark that makes power happen from your muscles, and you're using the fat and the sugar to make that happen. And it's just much more efficient to do it with fat, but we just don't do it that quickly. So the more you exercise, though, the more mitochondria you have, and the more well they work. And if you do that really regularly, you get stronger. So you do this exercise, and the next time you do it, you're like, hey, this isn't as hard. And this is why people train for a marathon, and they find if they do a training program, they've built more mitochondria into their muscles, and now they're working more efficiently. And your muscles know how to handle lactate even better. So suddenly, you're actually feeling strong.
Okay, yeah. So mitochondria are like the powerhouse of the cell. They're the engine that sort of allows a generation of energy. So it takes gasoline and creates, locomotion, which is what we need for our cellular respiration, right? Generate energy. Okay, got it. So when that's happening, I know some athletes have this lactate shuttle. They have this unique ability to use lactate and then keep lactate levels low, but actually utilize it and generate energy. I understand that's rare, but some people can do that. So as we think about all this and think about where we should be spending our time, zone 2, zone 5, what does that look like? I know like a lot of folks, anyone here use Peloton in the crew? I don't know if anyone else is here. So have you ever done the zone training where you can go in and figure out your functional threshold performance, your FTP, and then that gives you your zones. There's people do these differently. There can be zones 1 through 7, some people do. Orange Theory, I forget, there's 7 zones or 5. A lot of folks use the 5 zone approach, but assuming it's maybe 5 zones, so you mentioned zone 2-ish is a good endurance zone, right, where you're doing mostly fat. And then on the upward zone, zone 4-5, you're hitting lots of lactate, and you last how long? Like, how long can I do zone 5 for typically?
Well, they say that if you're really in that level, if you're really hitting almost your VO2 max, or your heart rate is at 95% of your maximum or more, you're really only doing that for seconds. You know, whether it's you're doing it for 10 seconds or 15 seconds, you're not doing it too much more. If you're doing it for 30 seconds, you're probably dipping down a little into 4 a little bit. If you're doing it for longer, a little. Not that it's not bad. I'm not good. I'm not questioning how hard you're working. It's just really hard to just go at that level.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Great. So when I think about zone 4 and 5 at my age, I think about injury and the risk of injury. Like, how can I go sprint and like wake up next day and feel okay? So thinking about that, I'd love to bring Jae in maybe and get his point of view. Like, how do we prevent injury? How do we recognize when we might be set up to have an injury? And see and get a little bit of input from him. If that works for you guys. So
Please, and I'll be taking notes because I'm trying to do this too.
yeah. So Jae Yee, come on in. Thanks for. I'll step out and let you guys chat a little bit from JBodyworks. Thanks for coming on over and welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Hey, Jay.
How's it going?
Nice to be with you.
Nice to be with you. Nice to be with you.
Please tell us. Fill in the blanks.
So we're having a very rich conversation.
Yeah.
And we're talking about increasing health span, all the different zones. Well, one of the things about movement over time is that our body starts to break down, right? When we think about sustaining energy, sustaining our ability to do something for a long period of time, what is key is efficiency, right? Feldenkrais says it really best, right? Our job is to take the impossible, make it possible, and make, I'm botching it up already, pick the impossible, make it easy, make the easy elegant.
Oh, cool.
And so the best way to really prevent injury is to have efficiency in all your movements. So if you're a runner, how can you have every rep count? How can you have each step, each stride be efficient so that that hip doesn't travel and deviate far from the path that it should be, or that knee, or that ankle like that? And how we can increase efficiency is by bringing intentionality to the way we train. So have you all heard of motor learning development?
Motor learning development in the crowd.
One person. Okay, very good. So motor learning development happens at a very young age. You know, I have a 10-month-old baby, and I'm watching her figure out how to crawl and then stand. And essentially what she's doing is failing. Like, she's failing over and over and over and learning from each rep. And as she learns from each rep, she starts to get better. She gets stronger, and she starts to figure out, oh, this is how you crawl. This is how you flip over. This is how you stand. And so in this model of motor learning development, there's 3 stages. One is the cognitive stage, which is where you're putting so much energy, just like my baby, trying to figure out how to do the action. So this could be learning how to do yoga. It could be learning how to run all over again. Maybe you've torn your meniscus and you don't know how to work your legs anymore. It's bringing that intentionality to what's a good rep. And once you got that perfect rep, doing it over and over again until you hit the next level, which is called associative, where it becomes familiar. You know, like walking. Okay, walking's kind of like running. Okay, I can get with that. The brain doesn't have to spend as much energy doing that. And that threshold is about 1,000 to 10,000 reps. From there, after we get really good at that, we get into autonomy. So most of us know how to walk, we know how to sit, we know how to stand, like squats. You know, squats are pretty much autonomous for most of us. We have to sit in a chair and get into our car. By that time, we get into autonomy, it's between 10,000 and 100,000 reps. And at that point, we own it. It just uses us. Now, when it comes to getting better as an athlete, the secret here is to always bring cognition to your movement, to your training. In other words, how do you break down your practice so that you are getting the perfect rep? Where is my movement deviating? And how do I bring more efficiency there? So I'll stop there.
That's great.
Yeah, because I can talk about that all day.
I could do it with you. Thank you. All right. So I guess the question then is, how do you, in real simple ways, for people who, they've never done any kind of therapy or movement, and they just, this is the first time they've ever been in pain, and they're like, wait a second, I do this really well. How do you start breaking that down for people?
So they're in pain, you're saying? Well, the thing we want to do is to assess in the movements that are very familiar to us, whether it be walking, squatting, lunging, or some of the things that they love to do, yoga, maybe it's a certain pose, to see at what point does it go out. Out is essentially the brain saying, hey, do something different. This current setup doesn't work, right? And from there, we'll do a series of muscle tests to figure out what in the equation is either overly participating and what is not participating at all. And from there, being able to identify the weak parts, we can strengthen it through mobility, or we can also open joints and tissue also through mobility. So mobility is different from stretching. Stretching is where you increase your range of motion. Mobility is your ability to control any joint at all speeds, 360 degrees at any given time. So your ability to perform an action essentially is mobility.
Okay.
Yeah.
Should we demo it?
Sure. Do you have something that you're currently experiencing we can?
Well, I was lucky enough to be on Jay's table a month ago when we first met each other, and he saw that my hip was not working really correctly because someone was crunchy in here.
Right.
And his magic eyes and hands, he was able to figure it out, uncrunched me a little bit, and I started moving better, and I started walking a little more, more fluidly.
If we don't mind, we can.
Are we allowed to do this?
Do we have enough time?
Should we move these? Yeah. All right. All right.
So do you have any?
Don't hurt me.
I promise I won't. Do you have any active pain right now?
No. No pain.
Okay, good. In any particular motion in your sport, you play ultimate frisbee, where you find limitation?
Yeah.
Where?
So you have to step out a lot onto your pivot, or you have to pivot away from your planted leg, and so you have to step out a lot. And when I step out, and I start rotating on that hip, and then I get up, and I have to take off and sprint. So I start feeling, sometimes in the back of my hip, I feel some pain.
Okay, and is it in the stepping and loading that you're feeling the pain, or is it coming out?
As soon as I take off and sprint, I feel it up in the high back of my hip, and then right in where like upper hamstring.
High back of the hip and upper hamstring.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. So do you mind being on the floor?
No.
Is that okay?
As long as the camera can get me on the floor and it works. All right, we're good. Yeah, what do you want me to do?
All right, great. Why don't you go ahead and lay on your back?
All right.
Great. And let's have your feet this way. So. Perfect. All right, great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at where Dr. Harris is. And already his left leg's a little shorter. So that tells me that there's a discrepancy in his pelvis. But just for function, we're going to do some muscle tests. When you test the muscles, what's supposed to happen is that the muscle is supposed to meet me where I'm asking it to meet. So in other words, I'm not going to overpower him. I'm just going to ask him to resist. So right now I'm going to check his hamstrings. He mentions the right hamstrings tends to have the high pull. So don't let me lift the right leg. Pull down. Go. And he was not able to meet me. I was able to lift his leg. That's a resist. So that was what we would call a weak test, or for us is positive. In other words, it doesn't work.
He's really strong.
So no one's home there, okay? So we'll compare it to the left side. Resist here. And resist, go. And I can't lift his left side. So I know that there's some issue going on that is turning off the hamstrings. Science-wise, we call that the arthrokinetic reflex. In other words, there's something, whether it be a jammed joint, a prior injury, or other signal that is causing that muscle to shut down. Okay? So if you lay down again, we'll go ahead and... Yeah, absolutely. This way? Perfect. So I'm going to change my leg position. So resist again. Go. Good. And go. Let's try that again. Go. That's good. And go. Great. And now we're going to bring it out to the side. Hold it here. Resist. That's strong. And out to the side. Resist. Also strong. Okay. So then it pulls up into your high, low back, correct? When you take off?
Yeah, more like SI joint area.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
So one of the muscles that stabilizes the SI joint and low back is the QL. The QL are like the guy wires on the Golden Gate Bridge. They keep that tower tall. So what we can do is we can shorten that QL and say, hey, QL, do you work? Resist, go. Nobody's home. So we know hamstrings aren't working, QL doesn't work. It's exactly what he talked about, resist, go. And he doesn't have to be in the sport to know that it's not working. Relax, good. Awesome. So when we look at this, there's two muscles that aren't working. And I want to know what is it going to take to turn on those muscles. So I bring it back. So in this position, you'll know that the muscle in the QL is short. One of the muscles that support the QL is your adductors. So I'm going to touch the adductors here. And I'm going to ask them to work again, feet together. And resist. Good to go. Yeah? So I'll let go of the adductor, resist again. Nobody home, that was not fun. Good, hold it there. Touch again, go. And it locks back in. So what does that mean? It means that when I stimulate the adductors, the QL gets to turn back on. Well, they work together. So it could either mean that the adductors are working too hard or not hard enough. So we can resist, put feet together, and ask the adductors to work, resist. That's going to stimulate the adductors. Now they worked. Go back to the QL, resist. Good. So those adductors could probably use some strength training. Okay? So.
Help me out, my adductors are kind of...
So that's
Thank
a
you.
short demonstration. In this case, it would be incorporating mobility to activate the adductors, and then also mobility to open up the QL.
So I find that absolutely amazing personally. Like, okay, this is bothering me here when I do that movement, and all of a sudden Jay's telling us, oh, the problem is over here.
Oftentimes, yeah.
So that's amazing. I just want to thank you. I want to promote what you do at JBodyworks in San Francisco. Jae Yee, thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
And I look forward to hopefully you'll get more folks that are interested in come see what you do. So
Great.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. We were running a little bit over. We could spend here a couple hours, but I wanted to take any questions that other people have from what Jay did just now, or other questions that came up during the course of our conversation. Does anyone have anything they want to bring up?
And I'll check the chat, see if there's any questions for us on there.
I know someone had their hand raised that was on Zoom. So I think one of the questions that came up is, how do we go? How can we do a self-assessment, sort of what Jay did here, as a practitioner doing an examination on you? And my understanding from that, and in talking to Jay a bit, is like doing your own self-care program, right? So if you do your daily stretching, if you're doing martial arts or you're doing yoga, it really allows you to do sort of a self-check in your own sort of confined laboratory, what I like to call your controlled experiment, So you when you do your warm-ups before Ultimate Frisbee, or if you do yoga, you're contained, it's controlled, and you can then check in and see what muscles are working and which aren't working. Of course, there's a whole nother level of sophistication, which Jay just showed us, which we can't map on our own head on our own, hence going to health professionals like that. So, yeah.
Should I stand?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Come on in.
One thing that you could do at home for personal care is to do some self-assessments, as you were saying. And the easiest self-assessments are range of motion test, or do 10 squats, see how that feels. and then do your openings, do your warm-ups, and then do the same assessment. If you've increased range of motion, or the experience of doing 10 more squats is easier, your body is more primed to go. And there are days that you're stressed out. Maybe you're hormonally off that day, or you're on a high stress, you have a high stress day or at work, and you do your openings and you actually lose range of motion. Well, your nervous system's already wound up. You might want to bring it down that day and do more recovery that day.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
Thank you.
Well, we ran over. We want to thank you all for your time. Thank you for coming in person. Thank you for those that joined live. We'll post this on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, Dr. Brad Jacobs. If you'd like to come and want to see this again, please sign up for our newsletter where we'll get announcements. We'll let you know. We do this once a month on Tuesdays to Your Health here at Cavallo Point. And we really enjoy doing this. We're going to do a 4-part series on healthy aging. This is just the first part of that. So thank you all again. We look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you.